Scent of a Woman by Al Pacino. This kid named Charlie wakes up in boarding school and just starts thinking like, man, I got to make my plane fare home for Christmas. So he goes and checks the job board, and he does find one job on there for over Thanksgiving break. He can basically take care of an elderly person for $300, which will definitely send him back from, the East Coast, Northeast Coast, down to or up to Oregon for Christmas break. So he's all pumped. He's like, let me go meet this guy. Meanwhile, there's just a bunch of rich kids that are like going to Gestag and, like Vermont and all these fancy places with these 5-course, 6-course, 7-course meals and nice cigars and alcohol. And, they're in high school. So he's just like, look, I don't have $2,000 to put to a trip to these rich kids. And the rich kids are like, oh, it's okay. I'm just giving you drippings for the poor, and they're being jerks. So, Charlie's looking forward to getting away and at least meeting the guy for the job, because at least he can go back and see his family. So he shows up at the house, when he's done with class, and the mother's there, and she says, let me go take you to meet Mr. Slade, who you'll be taking care of. So she walks him into the room, and it's basically a dark, dingy shed out back with a radio and a man, Al Pacino, Colonel Slade, smoking cigars and drinking Jack Daniels on ice. And he says, how's your skin, son? I like my aids to be presentable. And Charlie goes, my skin, sir? And he says, oh, no, we got a moron on our hands. By the way, don't sir me. Colonel if you must, but just don't call me sir. Call me Frank if you can. So he says, yes, sir. And he says, uh-oh. And he says, my skin, sir, I used to use Noxzema, but my roommate had Clinique because he's from Chestnut Hill. The History of My Skin by Charles Sims. What is your story, Charles? You on student aid, son? Charlie says, yes. He says, student aid, read crook. Your mother works at a camera store with a high profit margin, and your father sells... I don't know what he says, but he basically tries to size up Charlie, and Charlie, gets really scared, because he's actually kind of close to the truth. But at the same time, there are some differences in Charlie. For example, his parents aren't crooks. It's his stepdad, and he doesn't have a cohesive American dream crook family. He's got a hardworking, broken family, as they call it. And, he's dismissed by Colonel Slade. Dismissed. Get out of here, boy. Don't talk to me no more. So Charlie's walking out thinking he didn't get the job. But as it turns out, the mother says, no, you're hired. You're the only person that showed up. So, we really need this getaway. And, you'll have an easiest $300 you ever made. Just come back and take care of Frank. You got to walk him, and, if you can keep him under 40 drinks a day, you're doing a good job. Try watering down his alcohol, and don't let him smoke too much, and definitely air him out. Here's the thing you may have realized. Colonel Slade is blind. No one knows why, but the man is blind. That's why he needs all this taken care of. Just a detail I forgot to mention. So he's coming back to school, Charlie, and it's nighttime at this point, and he's back in school. He works at the library, so one of these richers comes up, these rich kids, and says, Chaz, man, I need the book, man. I need you to lend me this book. He said, this book's already reserved. He said, Chaz, if you don't lend me this book, it's my ass, man. I need the book. He says, fine, but if you don't have it back by morning, it's my ass. He says, Chaz, don't worry, baby. And they're walking outside, and suddenly at the lamppost, you can see Harry Jimmy and Trent up by the who are some of the other rich kids, and they're fooling with the lamppost next to where the headmaster parks his car. And, they seem to be installing some sort of thing. And George shouts out to him, "Hey, what are you doing?" And they say, "Keep your voice down. I'll tell you in the morning." And then Miss Huntsinger, the library, the assistant to the headmaster, walks out and says, "What's all the noise, George? Hey, Charlie," and or "Hey, Charles," and they say, "Oh, it's nothing. It's nothing." George says nothing, but I like your blouse. Did you make this scarf? Can I have one of your hugs? And anyway, that's it. Next morning we wake up, and the headmaster parks in his parking spot in front of the whole school in his brand new Jaguar. And they say, "Oh, man, I can't believe he's got a Jaguar. I mean, how stupid can you be, board of trustees?" And as he gets out, all the students are around, heading into class. And a balloon starts to pump up over the Jaguar, hanging from the lamppost. And there's some liquid substance in it. And then you hear on the PA system, "Mr. Trask is our fearless leader. An avid learner, a voracious reader. He can cite the Iliad in ancient Greek while fishing for trout from a rippling creek. In him wisdom abounds, but the questions also abound. How does Mr. Trask make such wonderful deals? Why did the trustees give him Jaguar wheels? He wasn't conniving, he wasn't crass. He simply puckered up and kissed their ass." And then it has a picture on the balloon of Mr. Trask kissing the ass of the fat trustees, cartoon picture. So Mr. Trask, being putz, tries to pop the balloon with his key. He tries 3 times. The 3rd time he stands on his car, punctures the bottom of it, and white paint falls from the balloon, which pops all the way onto the car and Mr. Trask. And George behind his, everyone cheers, and George behind his paper covering his face yells, "Fuck you!" So we all see, what's happening, a little prank, and Mr. Trask takes it seriously, and he finds out from Miss Huntsinger that George and Charlie were in a position to identify the people who did break the the prank. And he basically says to them, "If you don't tell me who did this, I will expel you both." So he sends George out and talks to Charlie and says, I was going to draft a guaranteed pick for you to go to Harvard if you could identify. So you take the weekend to think about it. And so now all of a sudden, Charlie's life has changed. He has a lot on his mind, and George is on his way to Gstaad or Vermont or somewhere with the boys. So George kind of tries to pull Charlie's coat and say, "Hey, man, the way the rich kids operate is it's us against them no matter what. We just never leave a fellow brother twisting out in the wind. You understand that, right? I'm just trying to get you up to speed here, kid, because I know you're on scholarship." And Charlie's like, "What does me being on scholarship have to do with it?" And he's like, "No, don't worry about that, baby. Just don't leave us twisted in the wind. The move is stonewall everybody. Here, I'll tell you what. You can call me in Vermont, and I'll tell you more of the moves. What we're gonna do." And he's like, "Chaz, I'm sensing a heaviness. I don't get an easy feeling." And Chaz is like, "Neither do I, but I'll call you in Vermont at the Sugar Bush Lodge. I'll give you a call while I'm taking care of this old man over Thanksgiving break." So cut to he goes 9 a.m. bright and early in the morning, first day of break, over to Slade's house, and they're just leaving, and Al Pacino, Colonel Frank Slade is in there, and he's wearing his dress blues and talking to women. He's talking to women on the phone. There has got to be a sultry body behind that luscious voice. And, he tells the guys to he tells Charlie to go get his shoulder boards, and then his daughter comes to visit him, and he's saying, almost 2 p.m. and the Flintstones haven't left yet. So he kisses her, bye, hi, honey, bye, honey. And then they roll out, and sure enough, Charlie is alone with Frank Slade, Colonel Frank Slade, and he says, all right, taxi should be here in 10 minutes. And Charlie says, what do you mean the taxi? And he says, oh, we're going to the Freak City, we're going to New York City, Freak Central, the Big Apple itself. Charlie says, I don't think this is what he tries to call the parents, and Frank eats the paper with the number on it. And he says, oh boy, now you're stuck with me. You're not going to let me go alone, are you? And so they get in the cab. They head up to New York City, believe it or not. Now, there's a couple freakouts on the way because Frank obviously doesn't like being blind, and he's saying, don't grab my arm. I grab your arm. You touch it again, I'll break it off. Stuff like that. So, yeah, but they get on the plane. They're flying first class. He gets another double Jack and Coke and says, I have a feeling that big things could happen to that little thing of yours, Charlie. Oh, boy. Women. Who made them? God must have been a fucking genius. Legs. I don't care if they're secondhand Steinways or tree trunks. Tits. Hoo-ah. Nipples looking at you like secret searchlights. Legs, what's between them? Ooh, passport to heaven. I need a drink. And he's like, there's only 2 syllables in this English language worth hearing, Charlie. Pussy. And then Charlie's looking at him kind of strange, but then the waitress comes up and says, can I get you all a drink? And he says, sure. Double Jack and Coke, and thank you, Daphne. And he goes, well, how'd you know her name was Daphne? And Frank says, well, her voice is California Chickie, but her cologne is Ogle Vistas de Son, or some English name. So I see some California Chickie girl bucking for Old English. I call her Daphne. And then Charlie kind of looks at him with a little bit of respect and admiration for the way he thinks. So Charlie and Frank get off, and they go to the Waldorf Astoria hotel, and Frank just continues to act a little bit out of control, a little bit too familiar with the women, and yet he's blind, so yeah, they take a limo from the Waldorf Astoria hotel to the Oak Room, and on the limo ride, as Charlie is saying, I am going to hop the shuttle after dinner. Colonel Frank Slade senses a heavy feeling in Charlie, and finally he gets Charlie to say, I saw some guys doing something, and instantly, Frank says, to tell or not to tell, or it's your ass. And Charlie's really astonished because he gave so little information, and Frank Slade seems to have completely pinned him on what he's going through. And he starts to look at Frank as a guy that maybe can help him through this situation. At the same time, he wants to be the freak out of there because the guy's bananas, man. He's a blind guy flying to New York to hit on women. And anyway, they get to the Oak Room and have a nice table and bread, butter, radishes, the specials, it's all being read to them and served to them, and he's ordering his Jack and Coke and double Jack and Coke on the rocks, and Charlie asks the waiter to water it down, but Frank perceives that the hand gesture and says, don't do that, and then finally Charlie has to confront Frank and say, look, man, you got this $100 burger. You got this $1,000 room, a $24 burger, drinking like it's nothing. And I mean, are you some rich miser? And he says, no, I'm just a poor working man. I saved up my pension checks from the Army, and I'm just going on a little parade pleasures. I'm going to see my brother, nothing like family, eat an agreeable meal, stay at a beautiful room, make love to a beautiful woman, and lay down in my big, luxurious bed at the Waldorf Astoria and blow my brains out. How about a roll, Charlie? I buttered it for you. Now suddenly Charlie's like, whoa, 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 whoa. No, I don't want a roll. Okay, have a radish. No, Colonel Slade, you said you want to blow your brains out? He said, this mission is on a need-to-know basis, and kind of brushed it off, and Charlie then says, I got to get out, I got to go, and Colonel Slade said, oh, I lied, the last shuttle was at 9, and now it's 10. He said, you lied, and anyway, they go home, and, Frank asked around about escorts from the limo driver and stuff. They basically go home, and he wakes up in the morning, and Frank is up getting fitted for a suit, and he's trying to make the call. Charlie's trying to make the call to Sugarbush, and he does, and the George says, the move, baby, is no move, we're cool, Chaz, the move is no move, and Philip Seymour Hoffman plays George. It was one of his first acting roles, and he did a very good job in it. So anyway, Frank's getting fitted by this woman for a suit in the room, the suite at the Waldorf Astoria. And, you can see this movie has got some layers to it. I really recommend you watch it, because basically they go on a weekend of pleasures, but at the end of it, Colonel Slade still wants to blow his brains out. And this is after he's driven a Ferrari, blind, mind you. And, they got into some adventures. He danced the tango with a beautiful woman, blind. And, even Charlie's had a good time. He got to drink a beer. I mean, he got to ride a Ferrari. And then suddenly, at the end of the weekend, Colonel Slade sends... he got the dream parade, man. He got the hookup. This is a thousands of dollar trip that Charlie got to experience. So he does feel very grateful. And he's starting to love Mr. Slade, but Mr. Slade now is like trying to take a leak out in public and stuff. So anyway, they get back to the room. Because he sucks, man. He's in the dark. So he sends Charlie to go get a pack of cigars, or a bunch of cigars from the shop downtown 17th Street. And Charlie, rather than getting the cigars, walks to the lobby and then goes back up to the room. And he's Frank Slade is back in his full uniform with a gun in his hand, and he's saying, "You didn't get the cigars, Charlie." And Charlie says, "What are you doing, Mr. Slade?" And he says, You know what I'm doing. About to blow my fucking brains out." And Charlie's like, "Come on, give me the piece, man. Give me the weapon." And he said, "Why should I? You just gonna go back to boarding school and sing your head off. And once you've sung, you have taken your place along the long line of American manhood." And Charlie says, "Give me the gun, Colonel." And he says, "No, you walk out of this room. Let me do what I got to do. I got a date with heaven or something." So anyway, Charlie doesn't leave the room, and he says, "I'm going to shoot you too." And he says, they get in an altercation. He says, 3, 2, 1, fuck it. And he puts the gun to his head, and Charlie jumps in and grabs it, and they're wrestling. And Frank is just pissed off. He's saying, "Get out of here. Get out of here." And, Charlie kind of talks him down. And then he says, "Give me one reason why I shouldn't blow your head off and blow mine." And Charlie says, "I'll give you 2. You can drive a Ferrari and dance the tango better than anybody I've ever seen." And it hits him, it hits him in the heart. This guy, he's driven the Ferrari, he's danced the tango, he went and visited his brother and got in the fight and ruined Thanksgiving. And all this has happened with Charlie, and Charlie's sticking by him as a friend. And it really pisses him off because he just wants to check out. And he ends up putting the gun down, and Charlie gets it, and he wakes up in the morning, and suddenly Charlie's in command of the whole situation. He's like when Colonel Slade says, "Are you fucking with me, Charlie?" Charlie finally gets to answer, "Yes, I'm fucking with you." He's not like hiding behind, "Oh, I'm a kid, I don't know." He's being the man. Frank says to the maid, "He means come over, sit down." And Charlie kind of nixes that and says, "No, he's good. We'll be out of here shortly." And they fly home. And now Charlie's pouring Frank not double Jack and Cokes, but just single Jacks, or not double Jacks on ice, but just single Jacks. Which Charlie's basically become a man. So they come home and they go to the Baird school in the limo. Oh, I'm sorry, they don't fly home. They take the limo all the way home. And now it's the big meeting where the honor council and the whole school is present, and they're gonna ask George and Charlie to identify the parties that committed the prank the previous Friday, or Thursday or Friday. So I guess the previous Wednesday. So he's Charlie walks in, he leaves the limo, says goodbye to Mr. Slade. Mr. Slade hands him the $300, saying he almost forgot, well-earned $300. And, it's almost like the whole school's against Charlie. And then in walks Colonel Slade. And Colonel Slade says, pulls up a chair at the front of the, room, where basically on the podium, next to the podium is, on one side Charlie and him, and on the middle the headmaster, and on the other side George and George's father, and in the back is the honor council, and the whole school is watching, and they say what transpired. And first they ask Charlie, and Charlie just says, "Oh, I couldn't say," and then the headmaster asks George, "Do you know who did it?" And George kind of bullshits around the whole thing. "Oh, I didn't have my glasses, but then when I pulled focus, they were gone," and that. And so still, I'm left with no real witness. And he knows Charlie knew, and he knows George knew too. But George has drummed up his excuse, and his dad's a big donor and stuff. So he really puts it all on Charlie and says, I'm recommending that since I can't take action against Mr. I forget George's last name, but George's family, he's the only one worthy of being called a Baird man, which is the name of the school, the Baird School. I'm going to recommend that the honor council expels Charlie. And Frank Slade says, "This is such a crock of shit." And he says, "Excuse me?" And Mr. Slade says, "No, actually, I don't think I will. What is your motto here? Kids, inform on your classmates, save your hide. Anything less than that, we're going to burn you at the stake. Well, gentlemen, when the shit hits the fan, some guys run and some guys stay. Here's Charlie facing the fire, and there's George hiding in Big Daddy's pocket. And what are you going to do? You're going to reward George and destroy Charlie." Now, I don't know what your motto is at this school. I don't care who went to this school. William Jennings Bryan, William Taft, William Tell. For all I care, their spirit is dead if they ever had one. You're building a rat ship here, a vessel for seagoing snitches. And if you think you're preparing these minnows for manhood, you better think again. Because I say you are executing the very spirit this institution proclaims it instills. Baird man. What is that anyway, a Baird man? And eventually the headmaster, during the speech, says, "Sir, you're out of order." And he says, "Out of order? I'll show you out of order. If I was the man I was 5 years ago, I'd take a flamethrower to this place. Out of order? Who the hell you think you're talking to? I've been around, There was a time I could see, and I have seen, kids like these, younger than these, their arms torn out, their legs ripped off. But there's nothing like the sight of an amputated spirit. There is no prosthetic for that. You think you're merely sending this splendid young foot soldier back to Oregon with his tail between his legs, but I say you are executing his soul. And why? Because he's not a bared man. Bared men. You hurt this boy, you're going to be bared bums. The lot of you. And Harry, Jimmy, Trent, wherever you are out there, fuck you too. Sir, I'm out of order, sir. I'm not finished. As I came into this room, I heard those words, cradle of leadership. Well, when the bow breaks, the cradle will fall, and it has fallen here today. It has fallen. Makers of men, creators of leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here. I'm not sure if Charlie's silence is the wrong or right thing. I'm not a judge and jury. But I will say this, he won't sell out his friends to buy his future. And that, my friends, is called integrity. It's called courage. Now that's the stuff leaders should be made of. And basically, he speaks a little more on it, but that's pretty much the gist of what he says. And the whole crowd applauds. And, he can't shut him up. The headmaster can't shut him up. The honor council basically says, Mr. Sims is forgiven from having to respond to this incident. And they recommend that, the three boys go to Harry, Jimmy, and Trent, check in for suspicion of ungentlemanly conduct. And then they say, to George, you're neither praised nor condemned for your part in this. Charlie gets to stay in school. It's awesome. And the whole place cheers, and Frank Slade's walking out with Charlie and smelling all the trees, and they're all happy. And then this English teacher sets up a date, or a history teacher or something, this redhead. She just comes to say thank you for speaking your mind. And, he sets up a little casual date with her in the future. And that's pretty much the end of the movie. They go home. He makes up with his family, Colonel Slade. And Charlie's got his plain fare home for Christmas. The end. Scent of a Woman. What a movie. Probably my favorite movie out there. All right. Peace.